conversation alone, we already have our guest in the studio. His name is Dapo Adaramewa. Did I get it right?
You did a perfect job, brother.
Yay! I practiced because I wanted to get it right. I mean, Yoruba people were very particular about our names, and we had that full conversation this morning.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's amazing, really, because Dapo has always been on the newspaper review, and we made a joke before the show started that we brought out a new side of our guest this morning, but the conversation is on moral education. You are an educator, and you're very experienced. You've been doing this for a bit now, and you know how it is when it has to do with this kinds of conversation. But before I get into the questions on moral education, we got some comments from some of our viewers, and we started doing that before the show. Before we went on the break, but we're going to get into it very quickly, and I will take this comment. All right, so first, let me ask you this before I take this comment. Who do you think is to blame for a child's disrespect? Is it the parent or is it the educator? Who is responsible for a child's moral education?
Wow, that's a very difficult question, actually, because there's so many factors, you know. It's like, what is responsible for a good pot of stew? Is it the water? Is it the pepper? Do you get what I'm saying? There's so many factors that go into a child being disrespectful. Now, what have they seen around them? Because children learn a great deal from what they see around them. Now, has mommy and daddy been speaking to each other in a disrespectful way? Has that happened? Or have they seen a teacher speaking to another teacher or speaking to a fellow student in a disrespectful way? Have they watched a movie where something like that happened? So there's so many factors, and it's hard to say who is to blame without really examining all the environmental factors that happened around that particular child. So. Yeah, it's a very difficult one. There's no straight answer that would be wrong.
But somebody should be responsible. Like, who takes the cake when a child is not doing well, especially when it has to do with behavior? I mean, so I was asking Yemisi this question earlier this morning that, so a child would spend half of their time with the teachers in school because, I mean, from sometimes from 7 till about 3, 4. If the parents are far away, probably till 6, then the child may go from school to a nanny who is also some form of an educator doing informal education at home, and then maybe till 9 when mom and dad is back, or maybe till 12 because of Lagos traffic and all of that, and that goes on and on. The child is done from preschool, nursery, primary, secondary, till uni, and probably never comes back home. So
all their formative years.
Yeah, I mean, so who then are we talking to because somebody has to take the cake when a child is behaving a certain way?
Yeah, you see, I always like to separate fault and responsibility.
Okay.
Now, because by and large, who is to blame is probably not the most relevant question. Who is responsible for correcting it? Because if we even narrow it down, we say we do an analysis, we say, okay, where did you first hear it? Who did it? Who did that? Who did that? Okay, we might be able to, we might not be able to find out who exactly was responsible for that child's change in attitude. But what is more important is who's responsible for correcting it.
Okay.
You know? Yes, you want to track down, where they got the idea from, but if you're unable to do, who is responsible for that? Now, can we spend more time, working with that particular child, maybe at school, at home? Can the parents spare a bit more time to work with their child and see, how do we reshape that child's values? I think that is usually the pressing question. But yeah, it's very hard to narrow down who is to take the cake, I think the parents, in some cases, some parents would want to say, yes, it's the school. He was not like this
before he left,
before
and all of that.
And then the school is like, well, no, actually, he's the only one in his class that behaves like this. So clearly, it's not anything we are doing, because if not, all our children would be acting that way, So there's a lot of that back and forth. And some of these things, a child can be walking past somewhere and hear somebody speak to another person rudely, and it sparks something in their mind. And they're like, okay, well, that's an option. I didn't know. Nobody has told me that was an option, but clearly I've just seen it happen. So let's see how
I can do that.
Let me try it and see how it works for me. And then it's about how well you can correct that child and help them learn or unlearn whatever it is they've picked up.
Okay, now, so it's important that we separate sometimes, like, church and state and all of that.
Definitely.
And looking at it, parenting is super hard. I've spoken to a lot of parents, and they say that even after they've read a lot of books, there's really no manual to how you should parent a child. But then I was talking about performance culture earlier this morning, and I realized that at times whereby a child would behave a certain way at home, and then in school a certain way, and then in church a certain way, or in a mosque a certain way, and then with friends or in their friend's home a certain way, and all of that. How do you put that together? Like, how do you now separate that? Okay, so this is how my child is doing. Because I'm going to give an example. So I was talking to a parent one time, and then the child comes home, and the child says that nobody wants to play with her in class. And then, of course, the mother would assume that it's the children that are bullying her child, because her child is very nice and very sweet in the home and all of that, well behaved, doing what she's supposed to do, doing the assignments. But she said, okay, let's go to school. She didn't expect that a mom would ask the question that, why are you not playing with my child? And then they said she's a bully. Then everyone says, like, she's a bully. She's always beating us. She's always shoving our head somewhere. She's always taking our lunch. In Nigeria, that she is a bully. And so because of that, they decided that they were not going to talk to her anymore. And the mother was so confused. Like, where did you get that from? And she's a single parent. So there was no dad, nothing. So there was no issue. Well, according to what she had said, no issue of domestic violence or any of those things. So where did you get that from? How do you have this behavior that you have? And she had to now start talking to her and start doing all of those things. But then at the end of the day, she was telling me that I don't even know if she has changed, because her behavior is different at home. How do you separate?
Well, I think firstly we must ask ourselves, even as adults, are we consistent in every way? Are we who we are to our boss? Is that who we are to our gate man? Who we are to our gate man, is that who we are to our pastor on Sunday? Is that who we are to our lover? So here's this human problem of inconsistency or cognitive dissonance, if you will, the difference between what you do and what you believe. So it's a general condition. Now, the only way to transcend that in children is to create an environment where they can be honest, where a child can come in and say, you know what, Dad, I punched somebody in the face today. He really annoyed me. And your first reaction is, oh, because the moment you do that, you're locking that child out. You sit down and you say, okay, so how did you arrive at that? And help them work through. So there needs to be that transparency, because if not, the child will give you what they think you want.
Okay.
It will go to Sunday school. It says, Sunday school, this is what you want to see. He will give it to them, and they will build that culture of always being different to different people. And it's always very dangerous, because once they take that to adulthood, there's no telling the impact that would have on their lives.
Okay, let's get into the comments now. We have Esther from Lagos, and Esther sent in a comment saying, the question is, who should be responsible for teaching young children good morals? Is it the parents? Is it the educators? Now, Esther from Lagos is saying both, actually. It starts with parents, since the children are first introduced to them at birth. The educators only continue from where the parents stopped at home, on the basis of agreements reached between educators and parents. Now let me take this one from Rafiat. Rafiat from Zaria says, I think it's both, because education starts mostly at home. Also, if you look at it well, the students spend most of their time at school than the home. This is why it is important that both parties play their roles well in educating children and good morals. So let me ask you this. Now, how do you think parents and educators can collaborate? I see some schools where they make it very important for parents to be involved in their child's learning, where they will probably have like a parent and children day. Not there's this one they used to call
CTA.
it. No, not CTA. Open day. Not open day.
Okay.
Not open day where your mommy will come and beat you or something. No, not that one. Where they probably have like an art class together, or mommy would, do something, and then everyone would come around and see, or, bring your parents to school day, that kind of thing. I've seen a lot of schools do it these days. I know they didn't used to do that when I was younger. I don't know why, but okay. For good reason, maybe. But how do you think parents and teachers can collaborate in actually making a child's education that is informal and formal very good, and then the morals very sound?
I think one of the key things that children need is consistency, and that's why you see a lot of schools drawing their parents close. For example, in my school, we engage our parents constantly. We invite them for meetings, town hall meetings, where we discuss, well, these are the issues that your child is facing. They need that consistency, because if your child is underperforming in school or has a behavioral problem in school, and in school we're trying to change that, trying to enforce discipline, and he gets home and there's none of that discipline, there's none of that consistency, then he says, okay, well, I can do whatever I want, because there's no consistent, shall we say, moral training across board. And that's where the problem sets in. Once you create an escape route for a child, the child will naturally go there. And so that's why you need that, it's on both parties. Yes, of course, the parents have a head start, but quite quickly through the education, like we've discussed, the average Nigerian, if you're walking on the island, living on the mainland, you're probably leaving the house at 5 a.m., coming back by 10, your child is already asleep. You don't really interact with your child. So you might have a head start when they're still babies, but in their formative years, the educators are the ones who are spending most time with your children. And that's why it's always very good to not just look at the edifice of a school when you're picking a school, not just flash, not just dash. You need to really understand the moral values of that particular school. What do they prioritize? If that aligns with yours, then that's good. That's a good place to start. And then engaging with the school. A lot of parents think that, well, I'm paying school fees, right? I can just drop him and then come and pick him when he's perfect. But no, you need to engage. It's like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. So the commenters are actually right in the sense that it's both parties that need to play a part in what we're doing here. And the most important part, I think, is modeling certain behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah. Because as an educator, when we are recruiting, we look at three things. First, you need to have the skill, you need to work hard, then you need to align with our values, right? And so parents need to do the same thing in terms of like picking people who align with those values as well.
Yeah, let me pick you up on that. It takes a village to raise a child. Does it really, though?
It does.
In this new dispensation.
It actually does.
How so?
Even more so, because children are just soaking up information everywhere they go. The TV shows they watch, they're soaking it up. The movies you let them see, they're soaking it up. It's defining who they are. So in that sense, it takes all the sensory factors that are coming in to raise the child right. Because if they're getting good information from this angle, they're getting bad information from this angle. There's a natural tendency for people to. Being bad is easy. Being good is what is challenging. Do you get what I'm saying? As human beings, the tendency is to, lean towards what is, easy, right? So it does take a village. It does take the educators. It does take the parents. It does take the aunties that they see. It does take the cousins that they hang around with. It does take the friends that they even hang around with. The TV shows that they watch. All information that goes in. It's almost like a child is like an empty computer, so to speak. And all the information coming in is coding. You're the ones coding that child. And so that's where the expression, it takes a whole village, because it's everybody who speaks to the child or interacts with the child is putting a bit of code. It's putting a bit of code. And if the malicious code is more than the good code, then naturally it will happen.
Just to put this conversation in perspective, what is moral education?
Well, moral education would have to do with raising up a child and imputing in them the agreed moral values of our society, which we feel benefits the society. Now that changes, that's where culture comes in terms of moral education, because culture does influence our definition of what is moral, what is right. But generally, there's a consensus as to what is right across the world, across different religions, right? So it's really about giving them that information that we have come to the consensus that this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, and allowing that child to truly understand and adopt those ideas. Really.
So, I know that there is like a general consensus as to what is right, what is good, what is bad. But then there's a school of thought that says that that can also be subjective. That is, whatever it is that we think is right is not necessarily what it is. I mean, somebody's truth is not necessarily what is the truth. Like, there's nothing that's absolutely black and white. So if we put that under a microscope, it makes everything a little bit here and there. So how can we define what is good for a young person, really?
To define what is good. Okay, first I need to deal with this this modern philosophy that I'm going to live my truth. I'm going to,
I like how you put it, modern philosophy.
Yes, it's a modern philosophy. I'm going to live my truth. I'm going to stay true to who I am, whatever I believe is what is right. It's a very nihilistic approach in the sense that once we descend into that realm where we say there is no right and wrong, it's subject to the individual's choice, well, then I might as well go out and rob a bank because there's nothing left. It's up to my choice, right? We know that there is a moral code, if anything, written into humanity's DNA, because you go all the way to a random country. You go to North Korea, for example, where people are currently suffering, and you ask even the guards, do you honestly think what you're doing is right? Somehow, they might have grown up in an environment where it's the norm, but there's something inside them. They can choose to kill that and not listen. And when you stop listening to it long enough, it will stop communicating with you. But there is a general consensus as to what right and wrong is. And we should try not to just adopt this idea of, it is whatever I say it is, so to speak. But if I wanted to explain what good moral value would be, I would take on this analysis by C.S. Lewis in a book called Mere Christianity. Now, the one we all talk about is what is good, or what is moral is what does not hurt you. Whatever I do that does not hurt you
is good.
You get it's good. That's the moral thing, as far as I'm not hurting you. But then morality should go beyond that, right? Morality is also whatever I do to myself, as far as I'm not hurting myself. Because if you look at it strictly from an economic point of view, right?
Okay.
If I decide that I want to cut off both my legs, for example, now that's not hurting you, but it does hurt me. And it does impact my ability to go around and produce within this economy, thereby doing a disservice to all of every Nigerian. Do you get what I'm saying? So when we just limit it to not hurting the other person, sometimes you hurt yourself, you're hurting the other people around you as well. So that is an element of morality. Treat others like you would like to be treated, and treat yourself with respect. You treat yourself with care and love. That is an aspect of morality as well. And then finally, it is also aligning whatever we do towards the purpose of humanity. Because we can't just sit and say human beings are just here because we're here. Regardless of what religion you profess, you must recognize that there's a reason why we're here. So as long as whatever we do aligns with those three things, one, it aligns with the purpose to which God, or if you don't believe in God, whatever you believe in has put you on this earth. It has to align with that. It also has to cause no damage to yourself, because by that you are causing damage to society as a whole. And then the more common one that we all know, treat others like you would like to be treated, and cause no harm to each other. So those three, I would say, are a fair definition of what is a good and moral education, shall we say.
Okay, let me get into the comments. This one is from David. David says, I think it falls majorly on the family, that is parents, older siblings, and elders in the family. This is because educators are most times overwhelmed with the number of students in each class, and it can be very tasking to teach a subject as moral education, if such exists in that school. Or the educator takes it upon himself or herself to work as a counselor or guardian of students by teaching them good moral values out of his or her own volition. If that seed good morals needs to be properly sown in the minds of young children and followed to the latter, the entire family member of such child should be responsible for these aspects of the child's life. This is because it will go a long way in shaping how the child will turn out in the future. So I know that schools have values, core values, principles, and all of that that they put for kids and for teachers, of course, to follow. But I also know that there are times whereby teachers take it upon themselves, educators take it upon themselves to do more for certain students, especially if the child isn't doing so great in school, or the child is unruly, or the child is not performing as much as they should, or the child has potentials, but the child is not just living up to expectation. I just feel like a lot of teachers have that foresight. They can see that, okay, so this child needs something, and let me just push. But then I've seen situations where some parents don't appreciate that, where, you know, you're trying to teach a child certain things and you just don't feel it's right, because at times whereby some kids are very conversational with their parents. No matter what time their parents come, they are awake to talk to mommy, like, okay, mommy, this is what we learned in school, blah, 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 and all of that. And the mother is not very happy with that. Maybe the teacher is going in the religious way and probably in their home they don't do that. Or maybe the teacher is doing it a certain way that they just don't believe in their home. Some form of crossing of boundary. So my question is on boundary. How do you set that line? Because I mean, everyone is saying it takes the village, it takes both parties and all of that. But my village doesn't want that. So how do we draw that boundary?
I think transparency is very key. As an educator, as a school owner, you want to be very clear about everything you believe. If you are going to be teaching kids about the Bible and you want to use that as a basis for moral training, be very transparent with your parents. Don't be so desperate to get parents on board that you hide it, and then later they're like, why are you telling my child to read Bible now? So you want to be very transparent, and the parents also want to do their research. Ask key questions. Don't just ask what grades did you get last term, how many A to C's. That is important, but what values do you believe in? Because believe it or not, facts have shown that it's not the smartest kids in school that become the most successful. So that's just the truth of life. Now, we as Nigerians, we don't want to accept that my child must get 5 A's. You know, that's what everybody wants.
I mean, I'm paying a lot of money. You should have 5 A's though.
But is that the biggest determinant of success? Do you want your child to have 5 A's and be unsuccessful as an adult, or do you want them to strive for those 5 A's, and if they can't achieve it, but then also have a sound foundation in terms of their value structure, because that is what is going to determine the heights to which they can attain in life. For example, even something as simple as a child learning persistence is so important, because we all know as adults that life will sometimes give you a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah,
it will give you like this, like that. So you got to learn to be persistent, to take the knocks, get back up, and keep going. But if you don't have that kind of values embedded in what you teach these children, they go out there and they expect life to just be soft, you know.
And become socially inept sometimes.
Thank you very much. Socially inept. And in fact, that is, again, one of the most important things. Like, I bet you look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He's probably not the best coder in his company at all. Far from it. Do you get what I'm saying? He's probably not the one. I don't even think he graduated. Actually,
Did he?
He did. He was at Harvard. Yeah, he didn't graduate.
I'm sure I did.
So you see things like that, and you're like, well, clearly, you know, it doesn't go to the most intelligent, it doesn't go to the fastest, does it? It goes to the person who knows how to sell an idea, who knows how to have faith, who knows how to push past, you know, certain, you know, failures and such. So why don't we make that part of what we teach our children? You know, why don't we make that the focus of what we teach our children? And then, funny enough, once you have that foundation, everything else will come.
Some parents will be very upset with you this morning.
I'm sure they will. but the bigger question they need to ask themselves is, am I training my child to pass IGCSE, or am I training my child to be successful in life? And let me be clear, it's not either or. We're not saying your child must get D's to have good values. But we're saying that you must also prioritize them having good values. And that involves you engaging with the school, enforcing discipline, modeling the right things. I always say, like a parent, like in our school, we've stopped corporal punishment. We never even had it in the first place. And most schools have done the same. But I think as a parent, you need to face the reality that if you don't discipline your child, life will. And the difference between us and life is that as a parent, we would discipline from a place of love, with the objective being correction. Whereas most prisons, the objective is not correction, it's punishment.
Punishment.
That's life. Life will punish that child, right? Just for the sake of punishment, not seeking to correct. Whereas you as a parent are in a position where you can start doing that now. You can start enforcing discipline, you know. And as a parent, you don't do that from a place of anger, because anger is a whole different thing, you know. If a child does something wrong, don't react if you feel angry.
Okay.
Tell the child, okay, you've done this. I will think about your punishment and I will get back to you. Because in that moment, if you react from a place of anger, even that child will sense. And you're sending a message. You can preach moral values all you want. You can tell your child, no, don't ever fight in school. But if every time he drops a cup, you round slap his head, what's the message you're sending him?
Violence.
Violence is key. Violence is the solution to solving problems. But yet at the same time, you take him to Sunday school and you say, read it. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not is not good enough if you're modeling the wrong things. So the parents have to model the right things. And even in education, everybody in the education sector, like I said earlier, you look for teachers who have strong, correct values that align with your school. It's better to have somebody who is not the most fantastic but has strong values, you know, and is striving towards it, and to have somebody who has zero values and then impacts that in someone else's child. So,
you know, I never thought about it that way. Like, you know, be the correction, be the change that you want your child to be. Honestly, actually, let's talk about it very quickly. Okay. You know, it actually ties with this that we're talking about, disciplining a child. A typical, I don't want to say every because I don't have the statistics, but a typical African parent believes that when you spare the rod, you spoil the child. When you are not giving the correct discipline to a child, you are not training them in the way that they should go. And you get what I mean. And, you know, sometimes I think there's a thin line between that and child abuse.
No, very, very thin line.
Because I don't really know if I should call it child abuse now, because a lot of parents may be angry with me. But, I mean, I think there's a thin line between that and child abuse. And it's a lot to think about, because parents now, because I've had conversations with parents, and they feel like if you don't instill some form of, what's that thing called? Iron hand. If you don't instill that to that child, the child will not do the right things and they will not be right. In fact, they will become softies, or they will become unruly. They become hooligans, that's the word now. So how do you go about that? Like, what exactly is the right way? Is it right for you to instill that kind of discipline to a child, or is there another way that it should go?
I think surely it shouldn't come from educators. They have no place in terms of you know.
Because I like that you say that again. So we hear it very rarely, like educators should
never ever touch anybody's. It's not your child. You can call the mom and say, listen, this is what your kid did. Come into school and come spank him for us if you're okay with that. But it's not your place. The best you can do is withdraw the child so that they don't influence the behavior of other children. Either suspend or expel the child, and that's where your powers end. But as a parent, yes, I think there is a place for you to discipline your child. Because like I said, if you don't discipline them now, the prison system will discipline them. The job opportunities they miss will discipline them. The fact that they will be stuck in poverty because they've made a lot of bad decisions will discipline them.
Wow.
And all these other factors are not as caring as you are. And when it comes to corporal punishment from a lot of parents, it's, you know, growing up, I used to have friends whose parents would whip them down, up, left, right. And in fact, growing up, of my two parents, one was open to beating, the other would sit you down and talk. And trust me, we prefer the beatings. Yeah, we prefer you give it to us, we chest it like men. We'll take the beating and we'll go. But when the other parents sat you down and reasoned with you and explained to you that what you did was a disappointment. Oh,
Oh,
that's the one that you'll be thinking about that for days after. Do you
it
get?
disappointed. No, 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 no.
It's you know, so there's a way you can go around disciplining a child. That's not to say there's never a place for corporal punishment. Yes, in certain extreme cases, if your child is about to put their finger into a plug and you say, oh, no, I'm not going to slap the hand, it's impolite. Excuse me, John, could you? John, John will still have a lot of voltage to remind him of what is right and what is wrong. So in those kind of cases, you got to slap that hand off quickly. It's better John should cry from you beating him than for, the electricity. But parents need to, we're all human beings. Like, they call it SAPA now, right?
Yes.
SAPA affects the way you, if you were quick to anger before, you are even quicker. Do you get it? So by the time you as a parent, you're expressing a moment of a serious absence of purchasing power, and your son should break a plate. You're not only angry about the broken plate, you are thinking, do you know how much that is, American China?
You know
How much I bought that? And the anger is really about the fact that other things, a lot of parents take out that anger on their children, knowingly and unknowingly. That's a very, very dangerous thing. And that's when you're talking about child abuse. That's when the truth is, it doesn't really work. You're sending different messages to people, and these children will grow up with a skewed moral value. If they feel that the one person who should have cared for them in life dished out violence upon them from a place of hate, they can't grow up and be normal, loving people. Except God intervenes on their behalf. They will grow up with something a little bit tweaked in them. They will change their perspective of what is right and what is wrong. And so that's why I say if a child does something wrong, and in that moment you feel that anger, we all know what anger feels like. For some of you, it's your heart racing. For some of you, it's, you feel it in your senses that, oh, I'm very upset. Tell that child to go to his room, go and think about what you've done, and then I'll come and give you your punishment later. Then calm down. Then you yourself look at it. What did he do? Okay, how do I make sure he doesn't do it? Okay, does it involve me telling him to kneel down in the corner? Fine, if that's what it takes, then do that. But not in that moment of, because in that moment, in that one moment of anger, the damage you could do to a child, it can last a very, very long time. They're very vulnerable at that stage, so you always have to be very, very, very deliberate about these kind of actions. It's not to say there's no space for it, but very deliberate, very calculated, and always from a place of love. Will it achieve my objective is the big question you have to ask yourself.
Okay.
If I roundhouse kick this kid in the head, will it achieve the objective of changing his behavior in the long term? Or will he just hide that behavior on the ground?
Children sometimes can be manipulative. And they spend time, maybe subconsciously, because I'm thinking about it now as a child, if I had done some of these things. Can't remember. But
I definitely.
maybe unconsciously, subconsciously, whatever it is that we want to put it, children can be manipulative. And I have heard progressive thinking parents talk about how their children would know that, okay, so this is what my mother would do, so I would use that against them. I know that my mom will probably not want to, beat me or spank me immediately. My mom will probably say, go to your room, or you're grounded, or something like that, because they know that, their mother is not all about, or their father is not all about instilling some form of, or doing violence with them or something like that. And so they use it against them. And if you are that kind of parent and you find out that this is what your child is doing, and you are trying as much as possible to do the right thing by parenting them, how do you address such situations?
Well, you see, they get to a level where you just have to resort to prayer.
Okay.
No, I'm being serious, because some of these things, you can't get it right. We at our school, we engage with our parents, say, okay, come for prayers, let's pray for our kids. Like, that is one aspect of it, right? You need to, especially if you're a spiritual person, you need to commit certain things to the hands of God. God, help me change this child, right? And then you need to understand that I'm not saying you shouldn't beat your child. I'm just saying you shouldn't beat your child without being clear of what your objective is. Don't beat your child to satisfy the anger that you have inside you, or that, oh, what have you done? then you're just satisfying that lust, what shall we say, lust for satisfaction of your anger. That's not the objective. The objective, if you're going to ever, do corporal punishment, shall we say, is to change the child's behavior. And so you have to, find that balance. And if you find there are some children like that you are throwing different things at them. Sometimes it just doesn't seem to work. Sometimes you just have to be patient and pray. Eventually, some children do come out of it. It's like a phase that they go into, and they will grow out of it. But they need to know that you love them. They need to know that they can trust you. Because some of these kids, when a child is misbehaving like that, there might be something really wrong, something that he's not told anybody. And the one thing is, when people have secrets, it often makes things worse. When children keep secrets, when there's nobody to talk to, it often makes things worse. And that's why I believe when we're talking about morals, we also, I forgot to mention, we also have to make it clear why we're telling a child to act a certain way. It's not just about don't do this because I said don't do this.
Okay.
Right? Don't do this because... Make a child understand. One of the most shocking things that I've come to understand now is they used to tell us don't lie. The Bible clearly says don't lie. I never really understood why, because I always thought it's to my advantage to lie because I don't want somebody to know these things. But then as I've grown now, I've understood that oftentimes there's a psychological weight that comes with a lie, that you have to top it up with another lie. You have to top it up. You have to try and maintain that consistency.
Yeah.
And whatever you're keeping in the dark often will get worse. If you have a bad behavior and you keep it secret, oftentimes it will, most often than not, it will get worse. Because now you're not engaging other people. If you have a problem and you're not telling them, because that's another form of lying, right? How are you? I'm okay, solid, everything's fine. Do you get? That's another form of lying, right? But deep inside, you're burning. Something is emotionally draining you, and that's what leads to depression. And you see, that's why they say statistically young men are more likely to commit suicide than any other demographic. And that's because as a young man, you grow up with this belief that
I'm man and all of those things.
I'm self-sufficient.
Toxic
I'm strong.
masculinity.
Yeah, toxic man. You are like, yes, I'm strong. I don't need anybody's help. And you're dealing with these things. Whereas if you laid your problem out with somebody that you can trust, you realize that, maybe the problem wasn't as big as you thought it was in the first place. And maybe it's something they can help you handle. So you need to really make these children understand why it's to your advantage to not do these things. And above all, just commit them to the hands of God, really, because nobody's perfect, nobody gets it right.
Yes. You were saying something about, parenting, education, morals. Like, how do you create a balance with all of these things, like for your child learning and also learning good morals, you wanting to know if you're going to discipline them or not, you knowing that, okay, so this is the right thing to do for my child, you knowing that, okay, so this is even the right school that my child should go. You were saying something about doing your research and all of that before you get your child into a particular school and everything. How do you create that balance? How do you know? Because at the end of the day, I don't always say it takes a village and not the box who falls down. That it just comes back to you as a parent. Because when your child is behaving a certain way, you're the one that they're going to call. That, ma'am, your child is acting a certain way, you should come and pick them up or something like that. So how do you create a balance where you actually, there's also this part that I want to mention, this part where you were talking about grades and then moral standards. Like, yes, you said something about statistics have shown that it's not the brightest that is always the wealthiest, but sometimes it's the ones that probably didn't even finish school that at the end of the day became more successful, maybe because they mastered something there and all of that. There's no way you're going to come and sit me down and tell me that I'm paying millions in this primary school and my child is going to be getting D's, but my child is somehow good in sports.
Oh, okay.
No. There's no way we're gonna do that.
No, but I just want to correct something. I did say I was referring to what's his name? Mark Zuckerberg. Yes.
It's not everyone that's going to be that, though.
Yes. No. I want to just be clear. Like somebody once said, he dropped out of Harvard. He didn't drop out of his Sherry Grammar School.
Wow!
So please don't take that as it means that you can just drop out of school and be successful and blow. No, that's not what I'm saying. School is very, very important, very crucial. What I'm saying is that parents have to know that it's important to find that balance. And a lot of the parents, at home right now who are watching will know that many of them were not the best in their school. Many of them were not the best in their universities.
Some parents will not tell you that.
Yeah, they'll tell their child, I got A's. No, but you probably weren't the best. But at the same time, have you turned out fantastic in your life? Yes. So I'm just saying that the focus shouldn't only be on good grades. The focus should still be on good grades. It is important to strive for goals, and that's why we have metrics. That would be like an Olympian saying, listen, it doesn't matter if I get gold, as far as I take part and I have a good behavior while I take part. No. If you want gold, you should strive for gold. But at the same time, you want your child to strive for those good grades. You want them to get those good grades. And any responsible school will do everything within their power to get your child those good grades. But then they need to build the character of the child along the way. They need to build the work ethic, the belief system of that child. They need to work on all of those things as well as that. And I think that's particularly very key. Sorry, and then you asked me something else?
Okay, let me take this last comment from Uzo. Uzo from Anambra. And Uzo says, personally, I believe everyone has a role to play in the child's upbringing. It is said that it takes a community to raise a child. This is why I'm not going to limit the responsibility to only parents and educators. Even religious bodies must be involved in educating children on good morals. Everyone definitely has a role to play because we cannot exactly censor what the child sees and feels. We could be wonderful parents, but the neighbors are bad eggs. Let's not forget that they can influence how a child turns out. We may not always move due to bad neighbors, but priority should be placed in terms of neighborhood when parents are choosing homes. Also, in the case of bad neighbors, it is best for parents to always be bold enough to point out to their child or children to the right people to emulate and be around. For instance, growing up, we had some bad neighbors, but my dad kept telling me stories of children who make money at a young age and the source of funds is not sustainable, that such children never become rich. So because my parents had played their part well in my formative years, I thank God for how I turned out. This is from Uzo from Anambra. So this will lead me to this very last question that I want to ask. How do you teach or train your child to pick good friends? Because you hear people say, what's that? What's it? Something that flocks together. Birds of the same feather flocks together. I didn't used to believe that as a child, really. Birds of a feather flocks together. I didn't used to believe that as a child because in my mind, I felt I'm different. My friends are different. Some of them were badly behaved sometimes, but I wasn't, and I was good. I was straight and everything. My grades were good. I never got in trouble and all of that. So, it's not my business, I know. So I never believed it until later on, I started realizing that somehow you would pick behaviors from your friends.
Naturally.
Subconsciously, but you don't know. So how do you point your child to good? Because good friendships can make or mar you. Friendships can make or mar you. So it's either you're picking a bad friend that would lead you somewhere bad, or you're picking a good friend. Is there a way parents can actually, help?
Yeah, well, you see, that one is very difficult, because quite often parents recommend, friends for their children based on the fact that, Mr. Taye's son, he's a member of our church. You don't know what Mr. Taye's son is doing, just because he comes to church on Sunday, you don't know what kind of child that is. I think it's really, you can't really pick those friends because growing up, I used to have friends that whenever they came to my parents' house, their head will touch the floor in greeting.
Always prostrating.
Oh, yes. And my parents would be like, my dada. Is that your friend? He's a good friend. And I'll not be looking at it's me that is regulating this boy. That's why he's still standing. If not, he would have gone into the world. So you as a parent can't really because you don't see the other side. You know, the same way a child can present one image to you, it's the same way those friends might present an image to you. So it's hard for you to pick. It's more about you instilling the right values in your child and making them understand that what you hold as your core beliefs, what you hold as your values are very important. And, you know, making them understand that you look out for people who have the same values or have values that you want to be. You can explain it to them however you want, maybe as like you know, it's like a game or whatever, that, you know, the closer you get to somebody, the more they influence you and such. And so if a child has the right core beliefs, you know, they will tend to go with friends like that. And then also self-confidence is another important thing, because quite often I realized growing up that you'd have the good kids in school, but the good kids, they wanted to be like the bad kids, because the bad kids were popular.
They were cool. They were the cool kids.
Everybody liked the bad kid, man. It was like, if you were the class clown, disrupting the class, everybody like, oh God, this guy is fantastic. You know what I'm saying? And so you have to embed in your child like their own sense of self-worth, that you are somebody. You might not be the person that everybody turns to, you know, but you're somebody. And then most importantly, there's something that my sister said to me when I was young, is that, listen, you can try and be like all these other guys and be like, and the truth is, some of those bad kids will turn out fantastic in life.
Hey.
You know, they will come out, they will now preach, they'll say, oh, when I was young, oh, I was a cult member, you know, do you get what I'm saying? Yes, some will be the lucky ones, but they make up probably 1 in 1,000, maybe 10 in 1,000 that would actually still turn out okay. But if you want to align yourself with them, more than likely, you might not be that lucky one. Oh. Because if I told you that if you strolled out of this studio today and there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that a car was going to hit you, you'd probably wait till that statistic changed, right? So don't take a gamble with your life on the belief that you're going to be that one lucky. That your friend that you're fooling, he might be that one guy that he will do all this rubbish now and still be okay. But you're going to align yourself with him. He'll be using you as an example when it becomes a preacher. He'll say, I used to know a friend. What he won't tell the church is that he was the one that told that friend to start doing those bad things. So you become a sermon for somebody else. So, you know, try and get your child to understand these things. And most importantly, the one thing that Nigerian parents hate doing, being friends with their child. They hate it. I am your dad, and that is all I am. You must respect me. You know, come on.
But is it a good thing though? Is it? Can you be friends?
You can.
But can you be best friends?
You
with
might not be
your
able
child?
to be best friends. I do know some people who are best friends with their parents, but you might not be able to be best friends, but you at least be a good, trustworthy friend. And that involves it's not everything you have to react to. I did this. They'll be watching your reaction. If you fly off, the next time they do something worse, what will they do? They'll hide it. So you have to, it's a very hard thing, and our culture doesn't lend itself to it, because when you start being your child's friend, there will be some kind of disrespect sometimes.
I know.
So
I get.
Come in and be like, I'll find out.
I get. Yeah.
So you are there. When I was your age,
I was frustrated.
I never have looked my dad in the eye.
I see.
So you have to find a balance and swallow that little bit of disrespect, but in the long run, it would actually help you as a parent.
Wow, I have learned a lot in this conversation this morning. Thank you so much for joining me with this conversation that we've had this morning on moral education. And in fact, I know that you've opened a lot of questions in parents' heart this morning. Now they're thinking about it. Should you or should you not be a friend to your child and all of that?